Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my God of War walkthrough. It is played on Give Me God of War, the hardest difficulty, and this is the very first video of the playthrough. Or the walkthrough, as I should say. This is a game that has a lot of cutscenes, and the cutscenes are dynamically linked to the gameplay. It takes control away from you a lot, and you cannot skip them. So for the purposes of this walkthrough, to try and get you to the gameplay and to get you to the parts where you're going to perhaps need my help, I'm going to try and edit this as best as I can. There's going to be some cuts here or there that's going to jump around, as you just witnessed, and it's going to just essentially get to the meat of what this is going to be. There is no real reason to beat this game on its hardest difficulty, other than the fact that it is incredibly difficult, and some people enjoy that kind of thing. There's no trophy for it, you do not get a good reward at the end of it, it is rather disappointing, but this is the most challenging setting of the game, and it is an incredibly challenging setting at that. Especially in the beginning. This is a very RPG-driven video game, so statistics, equipment, armor, and levels are going to make an ocean of difference in this difficulty. I'm going to go over what exactly is the differences between the difficulties, but not in this video because these first fights are going to need me to discuss them. And to discuss them I shall, because they're very, very grueling. They're endurance fights, they're demoralizing fights, they're really going to set the tone for the game, but do not worry, these are some of the hardest ones in the game because you are not capable at this moment. I believe one of the biggest sins that this difficulty and this game does is at this moment in time you can't even run. And running is really useful for surviving in combat, so you have to do this first encounter and the next few without even being able to sprint. And I can't even begin to tell you how much it would have made a difference, but we can't do it, and thus we can't use it. So instead, the best way I've found to do this, I've done this a few times for the capture. I did one no damage that was super defensive, but it took a while, and then I did this one, which is a little sloppier, but it's arguably the strongest and most decisive way to kill these enemies, other than knocking them off the bridge where we started. This is easier to do though, and it's a good strategy to show people so that they can learn to do this for the rest of the game, because this is powerful for the full game. And the idea is, hit the Draugr in the head with the axe to freeze them, and then kick them into a wall. If you successfully kick them into the wall, it will do incredible amounts of damage to them, but be careful, because they do that. They're able to cancel out of the animation of a stun up against the wall immediately into a standard attack, which can be blocked or dodged. But it's one of those things that can surprise you because it comes out so quickly, and you might be worrying or thinking too much about just using your axe to chuck it again, and then you'll take a hit, and that's exactly what I did just then. But the great thing about hitting these enemies with the axe is it's going to add frost to them, and frost is a statistic that slows the enemy down. It also leads to explosions like that during certain circumstances, which can spread the frost to the other enemies. I believe that this fight is really rough because it's far too many enemies at the same time when you don't do any damage and have any options to really deal with them in any kind of, fast way, other than, of course, what I'm showing you right now. But the problem with this strategy is that the kick is so slow, you're going to come up against moments where trying to land the kick, you're going to get interrupted a lot. And it's frustrating, but it'll help, trust me guys, and getting good with using the axe is mandatory for this mode. You'll notice a lot of people like to throw the axe a ton, and it is good, but just using the axe to throw it is not the idea. You want to understand that using it to trip people is powerful, using it to freeze people is powerful, using it to stop certain enemies that you do not like or find to be more difficult is really strategic and useful, and being able to stack frost on it and do the extra damage is also going to come in handy as well. But you'll notice that this fellow here is not level 1, which it says next to the names, and he is now level 2. That is because he leveled up. The game has a Devil Trigger-esque style of when you deal damage to enemies, they can take a short while to buff themselves, and they will be given a whole host of properties that makes them a nightmare to fight. They become much more resilient when it comes to making them flinch and stunning them. They take, I don't know if they take reduced damage, but it seems like you have to hit them more. They definitely get some life back. Everything about them turns into miserable fights when everybody levels up, and it's going to really educate you in that you need to keep on top of these enemies and you need to stop it from happening. So to interrupt it you can do 3 things, but only one of them is the guaranteed way of getting it done. If you hit them with a heavy attack while they are transforming, it will interrupt it and stop it. If you hit it by throwing the axe at them, there's a chance it will stop it, but I've had moments where they've still powered up, and I'm not entirely sure why that is. It might be because I didn't hit them in the face. It must be maybe flinch related. And then the last one is with Atreus. At this moment in time, you cannot use Kratos' son to help you in combat, which is a shame because he's really useful. And if you shoot people with the bow, it tends to make them flinch and stun them a little bit and stop them from doing what they're doing. So that can be really useful as well, but alas, you can't use it just yet, much like you can't use the sprint. Over there in that room, there is a chest that can be opened for breaking 3 of those runic crates. I'm not going to be doing that, guys. I'm going to be going through the full game with the base HP and the base rage meter. And I do not recommend this at all. It is crazy in the grand scheme of things, but I'm doing it because I want to get better at the game, and I want to show that you can win under any circumstances. But be under no illusion, folks, this difficulty is very challenging, incredibly challenging, especially early on, and it's challenging because it favours the RPG-driven gameplay rather than skill-driven gameplay. Though that said, you can still achieve a lot of great things by sheer ability alone. You're always going to feel like you're hitting things forever, and they take forever to die, and you die really quickly. And it's just the flow of the game. It's the current game balance of this difficulty. There will be people who adore this, there will be people who find this miserable. This is the second difficult fight of the video. 2 wolves, who in normal circumstances would be easy, but under this difficulty take forever to die. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to throw the axe at each of the wolves and keep them in a kind of stun lock. And if you do it earlier on, instead of messing around like I'm doing, you can stop them from attacking you and you won't take any damage. But I was just kind of messing around and seeing if I could deal big damage to the wolves, and I still don't really see a great way of dealing the kind of damage we did in the previous fight to this enemy. Fortunately for us, you don't fight the wolves that often. That's both a negative and a blessing, because you don't see them too much, so you don't have to worry about them if you don't like them, but at the same time, you never learn how to really shit on them, unless you practice them. So, I'm hoping I'm going to come up with a better strategy than this, but you cannot deny the effectiveness of what that axe just did to this enemy. It's kind of crazy, right? One of the good pieces of design about that enemy is before it does a heavy attack, it usually roars. It usually does a growl of some kind. So you can always see the telegraphed heavy attack. But they attack quickly, they attack through your attacks. Every 2 hits you want to be ready to parry because they generally go through it. It's just one of those things that this difficulty does. And parrying and evading are your 2 defensive options. Parrying is the most useful because you can cancel almost any animation with it when done correctly, and the timing is so relaxed, Stevie fucking Wonder could do it. So you should be using parrying as much as you can. And at this moment in time, we don't have any kind of riposte, but don't worry about that. The riposte is something for later on to get used to. Just get used to the flow, the timing, and what to do afterwards. The best moves to use early on are the launchers, which are the heavy attacks. A really good combo is 1 R1 into R2, or 1 square and 1 triangle, depending on your control scheme. That will do a quick hit into a launcher. And one thing you need to know, do you see the dodge that I'm doing here? This is me because I can't run and I'm trying to move a bit quicker. When you press dodge once, you will do that little duck. It is a dodge and it can evade attacks, but it's a little tighter than you might be used to if you're a God of War player. If you tap dodge twice, you will do a roll, which seems to be a lot safer. However, the benefits of this dodge, the first dodge, is that it will continue your combo if you dodge in the middle of one. So for instance, if you hit them once with an R1, dodge an attack, and then press R2, you will get your launcher in the R1, R2 combo because it will keep the combo, it will store it for you. This is known as dodge offset, was the first instance of this mechanic in an action game that I came across, and that was of course in Bayonetta. It's going to help you in this game, especially when you buy some abilities, so do not neglect it. It's really, really useful. It's going to help you in a lot of situations, but at the moment, don't worry too much about it because you don't have much. This next room is pretty tricky because there is a lot of enemies, and there's not really any gimmick here that you can exploit too much, and they're going to level up if you don't stop them. And because stopping them is pretty tricky thanks to how slow the heavy attacks are, a good strategy here is to guide everybody towards you, and then land a launcher and launch them all, and then combo them into the air. The best aerial combo is the squares, or R1s into R2s, because you will only be able to generally land 2 R2s at the moment, and it does good damage, but it doesn't really do too much, and you can't kind of chain it, so it's probably better to perhaps do R1, R1, R2, R2. Additionally, if you do R2, R2, you can then do R1, R1, and you can extend it that way, but just experiment with your combos, guys. Get used to the animations, see what works for you and what you enjoy, and in this particular fight, I'm going to try, if I can, to lure them this way while still trying to whittle them down with the axe and everything. And if I get an opportunity to freeze one, I'm going to try and kick him into a wall. But it has to be a wall. Kicking them into ambiguous geometry generally doesn't give you the results you're looking for. It has to be some kind of solid structure, and then you'll get the big damage. But you'll notice we have a guy who's leveled up, and now he cannot be launched by the traditional means. But one of the great strategies for them when they are leveled up is to trip them. The problem being, tripping is not that easy to do. There are times when you can throw the axe and you'll wait to try and trip them, and it comes back and hits their leg, and it doesn't trip them. The detection can be a little bit particular, so understanding how is best to do it is something you're going to have to practice. And be very careful on the back edge of a dodge like that. I should have rolled. If I'd have double tapped just then, I wouldn't have taken damage, but I didn't think I need to because I was just backing up to get some space, but he caught it. It was a roll catch, but ironically, if I'd have rolled, it wouldn't have catched me. Or it wouldn't have caught me, sorry. So, something to bear in mind, but look at how powerful the blocking is in this game if you time it correctly as the attack lands on you. It can be really, really useful, and this is me attempting now to try and bait him into a trip to put him on the ground, but it's not really working because I'm not doing it quite right. I'm not at the right angle for it. And Atreus has stood around doing nothing. Don't worry about that, guys. Later on, Atreus is going to be more capable than you are, and I hate to say that, but it's true. It's the way the game's been designed. His bow is going to do more damage than your parries will, and I don't know what planet anybody thinks that's okay, but I don't, and we'll get into that much later on, but at the moment, stay calm, keep your composure, freeze them and kick them into the walls. Know that when they power up, you cannot freeze them conventionally anymore. You're going to have to get creative and hit them quite a lot. There is an ability in the game called Permafrost, which is going to help us when it comes to frosting enemies. If you're wondering what I'm going to be moving towards, once again, if I'd have double rolled just then, that wouldn't have hit me. Learn from my mistakes, guys. Don't be afraid of spamming the dodge. I can't do it because it goes against everything I believe in, but it would have saved me just then if I'd have done it. And there are moments when I do it, because I want to evade, so I just mash the fuck out of it. But every so often. That was an interesting hitbox just then, wasn't it? The hitboxes on this game are surprisingly good too. The only times when they're not is when it's something that has a kind of shockwave. Any kind of explosive AoE or big impactful hit, those are the ones that'll catch you because they have some kind of magic on them. But for everything else, it seems really good. I have had no reason to complain, and a lot of things irk and vex me in video games, so the fact that that hasn't bugged me is definitely a feather in this game's cap. But once they're dead, use it as an opportunity to get your breath. You'll notice I paused it at the beginning of the video after the first fight to see what experience we've got. We need 500 experience to get anything, and it's going to take a while before we get it. They really make you earn that first upgrade. And the first upgrade I'm going to go towards is called the Executioner's Cleave. Getting to the parries and the ripostes is useful, but it's not mandatory. You don't need it just yet. You can if you want to, and it's not a silly choice, but you have to get the guard break first. And the problem with the guard break is it's kind of useful, but you're not going to come up against people who block just yet. So it's one of those things where you're not really going to get much out of it, even though there may be instances when you can. Whereas the Executioner Cleave is a move that is going to deal great damage for the rest of the game. So this is the move I'm going to recommend you go towards, and it is an incredibly slow, charging, high-damaging maneuver, as Kratos walks against an invisible wall like a beast. And what you're going to do with this move, pretty much, is, after a parry, you should have just enough time to catch them in it, and then you're going to use it to get rid of individual targets that way. And I'm hoping it's going to make a couple fights coming up easier, because it must be said, folks, there's a particular encounter coming up where they introduce the archers for the first time, and you take on a ton of waves of people, and then I think it even introduces one of the heavier draugrs. It's brutal. It's really brutal. I'm hoping that now that I have the Executioner's Cleave, it's going to prove much more enjoyable than it did my first time through. But on my first run of the game, it was really rough, that room. I had a lot of trouble with it. It took me like an hour to beat it, and it just felt like it went on forever. But I've now beaten the game on this difficulty. I've now faced way worse odds, way worse amounts of enemies, way worse grueling gauntlets, so I'm hoping that when I get to it now, I'm going to look at it and I'm going to see a different encounter. If this is your first time on it, you're probably going to see what I saw before, but hopefully I can give you the tools needed to be successful. And one of the tools you need to be successful for your victories is right here. Exploring and opening chests and finding treasures and gradually working towards beefing up your Kratos. Originally, I wanted to do some ridiculous run for this guide, but then I realised that it's not needed right now. That can come afterwards. And I've got a couple of good ideas, and I have no idea if they're possible, but I want to try because I like this game a lot, and I want to like this difficulty. I just feel like it's poorly designed in more ways than it's well designed, and that's one of the things that I have a hard time getting past. But that's just on an intellectual level. On a gameplay level and on an ability level, I've already beaten it. I can beat it. I know this difficulty. I don't know it as well as I want to, but I know it enough to hopefully guide you through it. Because I've spent a long time with this game in the grand scheme of walkthroughs. Traditionally, I would beat a game in maybe 6 to 10 hours, and then I would start making the walkthrough, and then within, say, maybe 5 to 6 hours it would be recorded. Whereas with this game, I think it took me like 35 hours just to beat it. That is a long time to be playing a game, even a game as large as this. So I'm hoping that it's going to pay dividends with my abilities and my strategies and the knowledge that I've picked up along the way. But thank you for watching, welcome to the walkthrough, and you take care now.